Sacked rugby union star Israel Folau has sparked more controversy by making new comments about homosexuals during a sermon during his congregation. Speaking at a church in Sydney, Folau claimed the devil is trying to instill homosexuality and gender fluidity into the world. The 30-year-old also took aim at young people undergoing transgender treatment. Folau was sacked by the ARU over a post he made on Instagram saying hell awaits homosexuals and other sinners.
Sacked rugby union star Israel Folau has sparked more controversy, making new comments about homosexual people during a sermon to his congregation. Folau told a church in Sydney the devil is trying to instill homosexuality and gender fluidity into society. The 30-year-old took aim at young transgender people undergoing treatment.
You know, they're allowing young kids in primary school to be able to have the permission to change their gender if they want, by taking away the permission of their parents. Now they're trying to take control as a government to make those decisions for young kids that, you know, basically that are 16 years old or younger. They don't even know what they're doing. But this is the thing, this is what the devil is trying to do to instill into this government.
As if the Israel Folau controversy hasn't become nasty and ridiculous enough, there's been a fuss over the past couple of days about a social media post by his wife Maria, also a professional athlete with the Adelaide Thunderbirds netball team. Maria Folau, unsurprisingly, broadcast her support for her husband's fight and the GoFundMe campaign to finance it. Netball Australia wisely announced that they saw no problem with her reposting her husband's campaign. But that wasn't good enough for former national netballer Liz Ellis, now a prominent media commentator, who lashed out on, where else but Twitter. "There's no room for homophobia in our game," she said. "Anyone who's seen to support or endorse homophobia is not welcome." So there we go. Intolerance at 20 paces. Let's kick off with Israel Folau. I'm keen to get your thoughts here, Peter. I thought he might have made a strategic error in having the GoFundMe page, because I think a lot of people thought, you know, look, I don't agree with what you said, Israel, but you shouldn't lose your job. You shouldn't not be able to play rugby just because you have these religious beliefs. But then when I thought he had, as a sort of a millionaire, going out and setting up a GoFundMe page, I thought, well, that's going to turn a lot of people off you. But I'm told that he's already raised $700,000, so there must be a lot of people on his side.
I think that's true, although it's hard to know quite where this one is going to go, because there have been rival funds now set up to support Stonewall UK, a charity in the UK. It's hard to know quite where this is going, but it keeps on running. Well,
but his wife Maria, who tweeted her support, she obviously shares his faith and loves the man. She tweeted her support. Suddenly they're out to condemn her now as being apparently a supporter of homophobia.
And it's all because he expressed an opinion, and the opinion that he's said to have expressed is not the one he actually did express. I mean, he did say that gay people would go to hell, but the important condition was that it was unless they repented. So it wasn't an outright pronouncement. There was a condition which it's consistently overlooked.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, because it's an important distinction. Jane, that's my thing about Israel. I disagree with his view, but he's saying it's a sin. But he's not out actually vilifying. I can understand, of course, people will be offended by it, but he's not vilifying. He's not trying to denigrate people. He's saying, according to his belief, it's a sin, and I love you. I want you to repent so that you don't go to hell.
That's right. That's absolutely right, Chris. But I think if you haven't been raised around religious people or with being deeply religious yourself, it's hard to get your head around. But I went and had a look at the Oxford Dictionary, because Liz Ellis said no room for homophobia in our game. And I think the use of the term homophobia is incorrect in Israel's case, whether you back him or not, because the Oxford Dictionary says homophobia is a hatred or fear of homosexuals or homosexuality. Well, that's not what Israel Folau is expressing. He's saying, if you follow me and my God, you will be saved. He sort of, you know, can see someone drowning and he lets put it in these terms, and he's throwing you a life vest or a buoy. Now, a lot of people don't agree with that, but I don't think he's homophobic. But in this, it's 2019, and boy, oh boy, the modern discourse is crazy, Chris.
Yeah, well, you're spot on there, Jane. John, this is my point about it. Yeah, sure, disagree with Israel Folau and his wife Maria, and disagree with them robustly in the public square. But for Liz Ellis, it's straight away the label, you're homophobic. You know, they're sort of equally intolerant, these positions, aren't they?
Well, Chris, I was hoping, after we had the same-sex marriage plebiscite in this country a couple of years ago, I was hoping that these issues would not be on the front page. Maybe I was naive. But look, I've got a little bit of look, a lot has been said about this already. Hopefully I've got a bit of a fresh angle here. I didn't grow up in a particularly religious family. When I was about 16, I carefully read the entire Bible. And I came to the view that it was true. And I got involved for a couple of years in this church in Tamworth, which is precisely the same type of church that Israel Folau's in, because they interviewed his pastor and half of them his relatives. Very small little church. Now, these people, who I feel like I know very well. Now, I lost my faith in that church principally because they did believe everyone was going to go to hell. And I just sort of thought to myself, when I got to about the age of 20, I thought, you know, well, look, I mean, if I was God, I wouldn't send anybody to hell, OK? And I couldn't be nicer than God, OK? So, but putting that aside, these people, what the three of you have all said is so true. Israel said these things. There was zero hatred in it. It was 100% love, because he truly believes that we're going to go to hell. Now, every religion, when you boil it down, has something at face value looks quite strange in their beliefs. OK, now people should be entitled to believe in what the rest of us may think is strange, as long as those strange beliefs don't incite them to do anything physically, you know, harmful to other people. And that is not Israel Folau's situation.
GoFundMe is closing down the page Israel Folau set up to raise money for his legal fees to try to fight this decision from Rugby Australia, and essentially fighting for money over a contract. This is all to do with that tweet he put out there to do with certain groups going to hell, and they include, of course, homosexuals. So the company's saying, we are absolutely committed to the fight for equality for LGBTIQ+ people and fostering an environment of inclusivity. We welcome GoFundMe's engaging in diverse civil debate. We do not tolerate the promotion of discrimination or exclusion. So the page shut down. Full refunds issued. More than $1 million had been donated, so they'll all be given back. It'll be a big talking point today.
Crowdsourcing site GoFundMe has shut down Israel Folau's fundraising page. The company says it's committed to the fight for equality and will offer full refunds to donors. Caroline Marcus has the details.
GoFundMe has pulled down Israel Folau's crowdfunding page, arguing that the campaign violated its terms of service. The crowdfunding site's fine print says it cannot be used for campaigns the company deems to be in support of, or for the legal defence of alleged crimes associated with hate, harassment, bullying, discrimination or intolerance, including on the basis of sexual orientation. Folau first launched the fundraising campaign last Friday, asking donors for $3 million to help him fight his legal battle against Rugby Australia in the Fair Work Commission. His contract was torn up by the sporting body after an Instagram post in April in which he said homosexuals, among others, would go to hell unless they repented. All the money raised from almost 9,000 donors would be refunded. This morning, GoFundMe Australia Regional Manager Nicola Britton released a statement saying the company made the decision after a routine period of evaluation. As a company, we are absolutely committed to the fight for equality for LGBTIQ people and fostering an environment of inclusivity. While we welcome GoFundMe's engaging in diverse civil debate, we do not tolerate the promotion of discrimination or exclusion.
I think that issue's had enough oxygen.
So I think this is a very, there's a competition around rights here. I mean, I think, though, that Israel Folau, if GoFundMe, has shut down his page, he'll be able to use other crowdsourcing mechanisms to raise the money.
Folau has said his legal battle was not about money, but standing up for religious freedom. His move to solicit for donations attracted widespread criticism, but at the same time, high levels of support, with more than $700,000 raised before the page was shut down. Sky News has reached out to Folau's legal team for comment.
ANZ has distanced itself from Kiwi netballer Maria Folau over her support for her husband Israel. The former Wallaby star was dropped by Rugby Australia for posting homophobic comments online. The bank is the largest sponsor of New Zealand's domestic netball competition, with bosses saying they don't support the views of the silver firm. It also issued a public statement to condemn her after she shared a link to her husband's fundraising page for the legal battle over his sacking.
ANZ Bank denies it was trying to pressure Netball New Zealand to take action against Maria Folau after complaining about the netball player. The Silver Fern star became caught up in the furore surrounding her husband Israel Folau after sharing a link to his crowdfunding page. New Zealand correspondent Jackson Williams has more.
ANZ is a major sponsor of New Zealand's national netball team, the Silver Ferns, and the country's domestic netball competition. In a statement, the bank has revealed it raised concerns about Maria Folau to her employer, Netball New Zealand. The bank telling the sporting body it does not support her views after she shared a link to her husband Israel's crowdfunding page. ANZ has been questioned for its decision to take on a moral issue, given the problems it's currently facing in New Zealand. Last week, the chief executive of the New Zealand arm of the bank was forced out over an expenses dispute. Netball New Zealand is standing by Maria Folau, yesterday clearing the netball shooter of any breaches of its policies.
That decision's entirely up to Netball New Zealand. They are her employer. I'm obviously disappointed that she has supported Israel Folau's homophobic comments, but in terms of her role with Netball New Zealand, that's simply an issue for them.
After GoFundMe took down Israel Folau's fundraising page, the Australian Christian lobby stepped in, setting up its own campaign. More than $1.7 million has already been raised to go towards Folau's legal fight against Rugby Australia.
Well, the Australian Christian lobby is helping embattled former rugby star Israel Folau struck back after the GoFundMe page shut down his campaign fundraising. Christy Coulter joins us live now. Christy, what is the lobby group doing to support him?
Well, Laura, the Australian Christian Lobby Group has set up its own fundraising page to support Israel Folau's legal battle with Rugby Australia. Managing Director Martin Isles says the group set up the page on its own website and donated $100,000 because they believe it's right and sets a legal precedence. Since launching last night, the page has already raised around $30,000. It's asking for $3 million for Israel Folau's legal proceedings with the Fair Work Commission after Rugby Australia terminated his contract for a series of homophobic social media posts that he made and refused to take down earlier this year. It uses the same wording as Folau's original crowdfunding page. That was shut down yesterday by GoFundMe, who says that it violated its terms and conditions. The company says that it's committed to the fight for equality for LGBTQI+ people, and it's expected to return the $700,000 to donors. Laura.
Christy, thank you.
A crowdfunding initiative launched by Israel Folau and the Australian Christian Lobby has now raised more than $1.5 million. The former rugby star has asked the public for help funding his legal fees after his sacking in May. The new fund will allow for those who want to continue to show their support to the sacked rugby star. The page replaces Folau's GoFundMe page, which was taken down for being in violation of the website's terms of services.
An appeal set up by the Australian Christian Lobby for Israel Folau has already raised more than $700,000. The second fundraising page for the sacked rugby star was launched on Monday night after GoFundMe shut down his first appeal. Donations are now tracking at $1,000 a minute.
The Australian Christian Lobby is supporting Israel Folau with its own fundraising campaign, and it's kicked off the sacked Wallaby Star's second campaign with a $100,000 donation. Managing Director Martin Isles has tried to channel Scott Morrison to explain the lobby's move. In a statement, he said, by launching an alternative fundraising site to GoFundMe, we're ensuring that the voice of white Australians continues to be heard.
People want to rally around Israel. They see his case as their case. and they really want to push forward with this issue and raise their voice, I think they feel like they're being silenced.
It's asking for $3 million to cover the footballer's legal proceedings in the Fair Work Commission after Rugby Australia tore up his contract over controversial social media posts.
It's very Australian to look at someone who's been on a good wicket and say, oh, well, you know, somehow they're immune from the threats that come to you when you have your career taken away from you and you're banned for life from playing the two sports that you can play, and you have no prospect of future employment at any time soon. He's going to have to live off his accumulated assets for a very long time.
This isn't just a matter of a contract issue. I think that Rugby Australia themselves seem to be trying to make this an issue about their right to fire a practising Christian, which is that, and that's really the most concerning thing.
GoFundMe shut down Falau's page yesterday, claiming it violated its terms of service. The company saying it's committed to the fight for equality for LGBTQI+ people. The site had raised around $700,000. GoFundMe says that will be refunded to donors.
Israel Folau. How funny is this? The latest ban on him, the GoFundMe one, backfired today. Spectacularly. $1 million backfire. This is delicious. And I don't know now what it will take for the media left to finally realise how much Australians hate it when it does one of those nasty, moralising pack attacks to shut someone up, conservative, or in this case Christian. Latest evidence, this bullying of Israel Folau. You'll know the background by now. Folau, superstar, sacked by Rugby Australia for quoting the Bible, saying gays should repent or they'd go to hell. So, I figure, free speech. Folau's entitled as a Christian, surely, to tell his fans what his Bible actually says. So, what really gets me here is the vicious bullying he is getting in the media. That bullying has already cost him his job. Yet that still hasn't been enough for a left that these days seems absolutely pitiless. I mean, take what happened when Folau appealed for money to fight Rugby Australia in court for unfairly sacking him.
If you want to join this journey with me to fight for the right to freedom of religion, please donate.
Now, that appeal raised around $760,000. But also inspired journalists into a new frenzy, attacking Folau even harder. How could he appeal for money? He's rich, isn't he? He's worth millions. What a cheapskate. What a rip-off merchant. Here is the Sydney Morning Herald's Peter Fitzsimons on Channel 9 on Sunday. Typically unfair, and as it turns out today, typically wrong.
Folau probably had 30% support. I think after this GoFundMe, most of Australia went, what? Seriously? That's not what GoFundMe is for. GoFundMe is for worthy causes where the people need money and they can't support it. So they approach the community and they say, listen, I've got nothing in my pockets, I've got a tumour, can you help me? And people go, well, that's a really good thing to do. So they do it. That's what GoFundMe is for. And this stuff...
7,000 people have donated.
Yes, they're right. But I think he's lost the dressing room. He's lost the Australian dressing room on this.
Really? First, here's why Fitzsimons and the other haters are unfair. True, Folau is rich now at the peak of his career, but is paying a huge financial price for standing by his faith and his right to speak. He's lost a $5 million contract just when he's got to make the money now to last him the rest of his life when he can't play anymore. And his legal fees could be huge. And here's why Fitzsimons and the other haters are also wrong. They say Folau asking for money it's just all about his greed and it will cost him support. Wrong. This fight is not just about Folau, as he made clear in his fundraising appeal. But you know that too. I think his donors certainly know that. His fight is actually a fight for the rights of all Christians, and I'd also say for a lot of non-Christians like me who know that if Folau is silenced, sure as eggs, someone else will be the next target of that mob. And that's why, for instance, the Anglican Archbishop of Sydney today, Glenn Davis, he said, Israel Folau's right to express his faith and act according to his conscience is of fundamental importance in any democracy. And it is of great concern to many Australians that this right is being denied and vilified. Too true. Many are wondering whether they will be next, and I certainly am. And the Archbishop went on, the way in which Folau's motives have been impugned and his avenues of support cut off smacks of a new and ugly Australia, where dissent from narrow cultural views is not tolerated. Now, that last bit about avenues of appeal being cut off, the Archbishop was talking about GoFundMe, internet fundraising platform. The left petitioned GoFundMe, close Folau's fundraising page, this bigot, and it buckled. Said, sure, we'll shut it and send the money back to the donors. That made international news. GoFundMe accusing Folau of excluding people with his Christian views, and then GoFundMe excluding him. Hypocrites. Then came the backfire today. The thing that says to me that the public support for Folau has very little to do with his opinions on gays. And it's got a lot to do with people wanting to show their support for a man's free speech. Because guess what? The Australian Christian Lobby has set up its own fundraising page for Folau, and in one day, just one, it has raised even more money for him, $1 million. $1 million plus. Here's the lobby's boss.
Well, altogether, Chris, we actually have already exceeded the amount of money that Israel raised in 4 days on GoFundMe in just over 12 hours. That includes the ACL donation, but it's well over if you include the ACL donation. And it just goes to show, you know, when people donate to a guy in whose cause they see something of their own concerns about their freedom getting shut down, about that pinch of political correctness, they see that happen, and then it's confirmed to them by the actions of GoFundMe. It's a bit of an own goal, and people want to rally around Israel. They see his case as their case.
Many Australians are now just sick to the back teeth of the Shut Up Brigade, and for them, whether Christian or non-Christian, whether people who dislike gays or embrace them, Folau is their man.
Israel Folau's new fundraising campaign has already raised more than $1.5 million. The Australian Christian Lobby relaunched the Sack Wallaby Stars campaign after GoFundMe removed his page as it violated their terms of service. The ACL kicked off the new page, donating $100,000 of its own. Donations were flowing at more than $1,000 a minute. Folau is hoping to raise $3 million to help fund his legal feud with Rugby Australia.